It's pretty common knowledge that making a video game can be very hard work. Sometimes game developers have more ideas than they have time, and usually a lot of great ideas can be left on the cutting room floor. Whether it be changes to the story, its heroes, or the modes you get to play in, there are many untold stories you didn't even know existed. Before we point the spotlight onto these forgotten video game ideas, be sure to subscribe to The Gamer so you never miss a video. Stop and swap. In the late 90s, the Nintendo 64 was many gamers' console of choice. A big reason for this was Nintendo's second-party developer, Rare, who brought us games like GoldenEye, Donkey Kong Country, and Conker's Bad Fur Day, just to name a few. This studio was well known for constantly pushing limitations for video games, so of course they had their own share of cut content. One of the more interesting features they wanted to implement into the game Banjo-Kazooie was a way to connect the original with the sequel through collectibles that would be shared between cartridges. The idea was that you could find an item in Banjo-Kazooie, and then within 10 seconds, swap out the Banjo-Tooie cartridge. The item would then be available in the game you swap to. Unfortunately, because of hardware changes, the gamers would actually only have 1 second to swap the cartridges, which seemed to be an impossible feat, and so the feature was cut. Luckily, when the games were re-released for Xbox 360 in 2008 and 2009, the stop and swap feature was added to the game, which also had ties to the third, newest Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. Not many games with cut features get the opportunity to put them back in. We'd love to see all these features added back into the game, but we know we aren't that lucky. I had no idea about that. I'm gonna add that to the comments section. Big gameplay changes. The Bioshock franchise was a major series of games for the previous console generation. It was a masterclass in world building with its terrifying underwater utopia that fell apart over time. With 2 games released in this location, people were ready for something new. Previously referred to as Codename Icarus, Ken Levine, the creative director behind the original Bioshock, had been working on an original story and setting for a new game 2 years prior to its formal announcement in 2010. The game, known as Bioshock Infinite, created a world where instead of society going beneath the water, had early Americans going to the sky in an effort to make their own paradise. The game was originally slated for a release in October of 2012, but was delayed multiple times, eventually releasing in 2013. Over the course of these 3 years, a lot of gameplay was shared with eager gamers. Though, looking back at the game we got, and the game that was originally teased in 2010, many features were cut. While we could spend this entire video breaking down all of the differences, we're going to primarily focus on the role your partner Elizabeth plays in the game. Early gameplay showed her having telekinetic abilities and being more help to you. The final version was a bit boring, and she often just got in the way. Hey guys, we are very excited to announce the Premium Network. The Premium gets you early access to videos from The Richest, Screen Rant, The Taco, The Sportster, The Things, and many other great channels. Literally thousands of videos in one place with ad-free browsing. Check out the Premium by clicking this link. Sign up for free and start binge-watching videos from your favorite channels. Professor Oak Battle. The original Pokemon games, Red and Blue, turned 20 years old this past year. Just thinking about this is making us feel pretty old. Those of you who grew up with these games probably remember a time where your friends would tell you some crazy legend that happened to them in their game. Whether it being Mew hidden under a truck or that button mashing will make Pokemon capture easier, there was endless speculation. However, one of these many rumors was actually almost true, but was ultimately cut from the final game. In the game, you are given your first Pokemon by the Pokemon Professor, Oak, who sends you on your quest to finish the Pokédex. Rumors began to spiral out of control that you could actually battle Professor Oak and that he was the toughest trainer in the game. For some reason, the developers behind the wildly popular RPG cut this battle out of the game, despite it being already finished. The code and visuals for this battle are even still in the game. All you need is a Game Shark to trigger the battle. Luckily, clever gamers have managed to add the battle into the game through ROM hacks that you can find online. What were some schoolyard legends that your friends made up? Let us know in the comments below. Mario 2 Switcheroo. To call the original Super Mario Bros. A smash hit would be a massive understatement. Mario's first adventure was released back in 1985 and put Nintendo and console gaming in general back on the map. Today, the game has sold over 40 million copies, and the designers knew the next game had big shoes to fill. After lots of prototyping, the development of this second game was split into 2 very different games. One was an incredibly difficult game that was similar to the first release. This version of Mario 2 would be kept only in Japan, as it was believed to be too difficult for American gamers. The game the rest of the world got was a reskinned version of a game called Doki Doki Panic, and went in a completely different direction. It had 4 playable characters, the ability to pick up and throw items in a wide variety of locations. While most of us knew nothing about the original Super Mario Bros. 2 for years, the game eventually came to the West but was called The Lost Levels, and just by playing a few stages, we can totally see why they decided to not release it here. We've never been this angry at a Mario game. From RTS to FPS. The Halo series could be viewed as responsible for Microsoft's takeover of the industry. It took a long time to get where they are now, and nothing is more proof of that than looking at the development of Halo Combat Evolved. The game's developers at Bungie Interactive have said before it was shown to the public, the game was a real-time strategy game and looked almost nothing like it eventually did. At E3 2000, the first public gameplay was shown and blew journalists away, many of whom wrote about the incredible visual quality, which is laughable by today's standards. At this point, though, the game was still being developed primarily for PC and Mac computers. It wasn't until 2001 that Bungie came out with a near-final version of the game that was built from the ground up for Microsoft's Xbox console. The game had more vehicles, aliens, and moved much quicker. This change in game genre from RTS to first-person shooter was a smart change, as it quickly became the biggest game type on consoles. And if you were someone who was maybe disappointed with this change, fear not. In 2009, Halo Wars was released and gave a true RTS experience with really striking visuals. In the end, everyone got what they wanted. Roster cuts. Pretty much every fighting game in history has had a roster of characters that people will be unhappy with no matter what. No game proves this quite like Nintendo's all-star fighting game, Super Smash Bros. This game has characters from many different franchises battling it out. The past 4 games have had a wide variety of characters, some of which have been in every game, while others have only been seen once. With the announcement of a new game, there are always concerns with who will make the return. The 4th Smash Bros. Game, which came to 3DS and Wii U, had 58 different characters, many of which were in the game for the first time. Some fan favorites were, however, cut from the roster. The new game saw the exit of Solid Snake, which we were surprised to see in the previous game at all. The Ice Climbers were said to have been cut as it was too difficult for the 3DS to handle 2 characters at once. Wolf from Star Fox and Lucas from the Mother series, who were essentially reskins of other characters, were also cut. And finally, Ivysaur and Squirtle were split off of Charizard and left out of the game. What video game icon would you like to see added to the next Smash Bros. Game? Let us know in the comments below. No single-player story. When it was announced that Disney had acquired Star Wars, everyone knew they would have big plans to put the franchise everywhere they could. Gamers were especially interested in seeing what kind of video games would come out from the resurgence of Star Wars. When it was announced EA was not only publishing a variety of games, but that the team that made Battlefield was going to be making a brand new Star Wars Battlefront game, everyone was excited. With the release of trailers and gameplay, people were blown away by this game, but noticed that something was missing. It appeared that this full-priced game was going to be multiplayer only, which of course made the game's content seem very thin. Sure enough, the game was released and most people were done with it within a month. After release, it was revealed that the game had its single-player story mode cut completely so that the game could be released in time for Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now with Battlefront 2 announced, a lot of emphasis is being put on the single-player campaign, which is completely original with a new story looking at what Imperial soldiers did after the destruction of the Death Star 2. Lots of missing pieces. After Halo, Bungie was out to make a new franchise, Destiny, a loot-heavy online shooter that would create massive expansive worlds and a fresh take on the sci-fi genre. While the game we got had a lot of polish and was fun to play for a while, it was obvious something was missing. It was only a matter of time till the full story of Destiny's development would be revealed, and sure enough, in October of 2015, we learned the real reason that so much was missing. It turns out that the original writers of the game had created a supercut, a 2-hour video comprising the game's cinematics and major story beats. Senior staff at Bungie did not like the story and decided to cut almost all of it. The problem was, everyone else had been working on the idea that came from the supercut. So new writers tried their best to, in a year, write a new story that still worked with the visuals that were already made. With the eventual release of the game, the disconnects between story and gameplay were very clear, and the game suffered from it. Luckily, Bungie has been dedicated to the game, releasing additional story content that helps fill the game out. We're hoping Destiny 2 has less of these problems when it releases in September 2017. 3D Mario multiplayer. 1996 was a very important year for video games. Do you know why? It was the release of the Nintendo 64 with the launch game Super Mario 64. Much like Nintendo cemented the 2D platformer with the original Super Mario Bros., they had planned to do the same thing with 3D in Super Mario 64. But obviously, a game like this, the first of its kind, would have some changes made throughout development. cut levels, changed missions, and even a multiplayer mode where player 2 could be Mario's brother, Luigi. In a Q&A session between Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto and then Nintendo president Satoru Iwata, it was revealed that multiplayer was one of the first things added to the game and that Miyamoto was happy with it. However, they had difficulties keeping the camera on both players and ultimately cut it to avoid confusion. Thanks to the passionate game hacking community, this multiplayer has been added back to the game. But when watching players try the mode, it's clear it was smart to cut this idea out altogether. We wouldn't see a proper 3D multiplayer Mario title until the release of Super Mario 3D World in 2013. A whole new world. How do you go from creating the biggest MMORPG in the world to creating one of the biggest FPS games, with a lot of failure in between? This is what Blizzard, the creators of World of Warcraft, learned when trying to develop Titan, another gigantic MMO that would be based in action instead of fantasy. The company worked on the game for 7 years, only to fail and completely shelf the project. A few of the members of the Titan team went on to try to salvage some of the pieces of the failed game, and what they came up with turned out to be something special. Instead of trying to make the next biggest game, they made something small and focused. The first character they created for Overwatch adapted a pixie-like soldier that could control time, who we now know as Tracer, who has essentially become the mascot for the game. While bits and pieces of Titan do still exist in Overwatch, almost everything the original team worked on had been ripped out. Personally, we think it's for the best. Even a year later, we're still playing Overwatch as Blizzard supports it through new characters, levels, and game types. Well, what do you think of these 10 canceled ideas from video games? Do you think the developers should have kept some intact? Can you think of any game ideas that should have been taken out that weren't? Please comment your thoughts down below, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to check out more great videos in our playlist. Thanks for watching.